right, let's take a look as we send Georgia off at the most reliable team presented by Xfinity. And we're going to stretch this out. We're making our own rules here. Most reliable teams, because for the first time in over a decade, we have 6 teams with shorter than 10-1 odds to win the national championship, according to ESPN Bet. That underscores the parity right now. So let's go over some of the biggest strengths and weaknesses for all of these teams. Let's start with you, Ari. South Carolina, who is right now the favorite per ESPN Bet.
Biggest strength, they're just comprehensive roster. They know how to play basketball. They literally play just good fundamental basketball. They lead D1 in points per game in the paint and bench points. So there is no lapse on offense, and they're defensively pesky. They know how to just get out in transition. They run the floor. They just are a complete team. And so if you ask me what they're lacking, I don't necessarily think they're lacking anything, but those uncharacteristic losses were just that, uncharacteristic. So that's what I'm looking at for South Carolina.
Okay, number 1 overall seed is UCLA. Alexa, what say you, strengths and weaknesses?
Her name is Lauren Betts.
That's
May have heard of her.
Yeah.
And look, at a certain point, Lauren Betts she was one of the best players in the country this year. She's a 6'7" force inside. But what I love about her game is that she's the anchor of everything that they do on each side of the floor, right? So it's not just about her defensive presence in the paint, but they also will facilitate their offense through her. I mean, that can make things tough against, USC. We saw that earlier this year. But when she's able to facilitate and kick the ball out for threes to her teammates, UCLA is really tough to beat. So I think she's the difference maker. She's the separator. She's the reason why they could win it all. Weakness, on the other hand, is I think there's a question about, they haven't been at this stage before.
Right.
They had those really tough losses to USC. Obviously, they did avenge them in the Big Ten tournament. So I wonder if it's, can they mentally, have that toughness, have that ability to have that juice to really pull out some really tough wins if they have to go through a NC State or LSU, or if they have to go through a USC or UConn, or if they make the championship and then have to they go up against South Carolina. So it's just that more of that intangible almost that I want to see from them, because this is a team that is on the more unproven side, but doesn't mean they can't do it.
Absolutely. Okay, staying in town, crosstown rival USC. What are your strengths and weaknesses for the Trojans? I'm
going to also similarly point out a particular player. You're probably going to know who it is, Juju Watkins, right? So again, this is a player of the year frontrunner, I would say. We've seen her just explode for some really incredible performances. UCLA, obviously the one that we could really point to, the one from mid-February, but she is just a matchup nightmare. And I do not envy the teams that have to prepare for her on such a short turnaround too.
True.
Although I know, you could probably figure out you have to prepare for her now if you're in that regional, but that's a really tough matchup for anyone. Biggest weakness is sometimes I worry that USC, if Juju's having a rough night, do they have the complementary cast, everyone firing, to really kind of make up for that? And so I will be looking out for that. I do think they've made some strides in that area. Kiki Iriafen has had some really nice games of late. Their freshmen have come along really nicely. But again, when we're talking about some of these really big matchups, can everyone step up? It's going to have to be a team victory across the board if they really want to go as far as they want to.
Right. The last 1 seed we haven't spoken about yet is Texas. What say you, Charlie?
Well, strengths, certainly. We talked about a little bit. Physicality, the way they offensive rebound, their toughness. Madison Booker, I mean, that's a pretty good place to start for any team. Weaknesses, we also talked about that a little bit. They just do not shoot three-point shots. They do a lot of that. They throw it up, they go get it. And they do that as well as anybody in the country. But they don't have that one player they can turn to in a big spot that they can reliably say, hey, go get us a three-pointer. As great as Booker is, her game is the mid-range. She's not a three-point shooter necessarily. They don't really have that person. It might hurt them, as we talked about, down the road. That is certainly a weakness.
They're going to need someone to get hot from downtown potentially in this NCAA tournament. Staying with you, let's go UConn. We talked about them a little bit earlier. Talked to Coach Ariema. What are your thoughts, strengths, and weaknesses on the Huskies?
Well, you can almost flip the script about what I just said about Texas, right? UConn makes shots. You heard Coach Oriema talk about the fact that against South Carolina, why was it such a lopsided win? Well, because they made a bunch of shots. And UConn's better at that than anybody in the country. They have shooters everywhere, and there's no more efficient player in the country than Paige Beckers. She actually has she's one free throw short of being a 50% field goal shooter, 40% three-point shooter, and a 90% free throw shooter
Silly.
and leads the country in assist to turnover ratio. It's crazy.
50-40.
That's certainly a strength. But UConn's not very physical. So that would be very much a contrast if they were, say, to play at Texas, a team like that. They don't mix it up very well inside. Their bigs are still pretty inexperienced. And when they don't get a lot out of, say, Ice Brady, then Sarah Strong has to do a lot on the inside, and that takes her away from her overall game. So UConn can be maybe pushed around a little bit if it's a team that's big and physical and strong, and they aren't able to do what they did against South Carolina, which was spread the Gamecocks out, drive the ball to the hoop, and kick it, and just they pass it so well.
Right. Like Coach said, we literally made every shot almost that we took, and that was a big difference maker in beating the Gamecocks the way that they did. Last, certainly not least, is 3-seeded Notre Dame. Lost 3 of their last 5 games, but you can't sleep on the Irish and what Niele Ivey has.
You can't. She has great pieces. You have one of the best two-way players in college basketball in Hannah Hidalgo. She has a pure shot, and she's a pesky defender. You have a pro-ready Olivia Miles. You have a Sony Citron that can just be clutch whenever. You have a Lee Tu Kim who's playing great basketball. They have great pieces, but what I'm worried about is it a chemistry skit? Is it a disjointedness? We don't know, but let's just compare stats real quick. In their 5 losses, they struggle from three-point shooting 28.6% with their assist-to-turnover ratio at 88. It's just, you've seen a just giant, like, fall in their efficiency with shooting in their losses. So when their shot's not dropping, they're not winning. And that's something that Niele Ivey has to go to the board and say, hey, how can we make sure we're not forcing it? We're letting the game come to us, and we're playing Notre Dame basketball. That's what I'm looking forward to with them.
Olivia Miles really thrived shooting the 3 for majority of this season. There was an uptick there, and then she's gotten into a little funk, so we'll see what this last week and a half
and the assists,
can do for them.
Really quickly, their assists went down. When they're losing, they're not distributing the ball. It's just, I don't necessarily know if it's selfishness, but it's just not moving the ball in the way that they have prior to number 1. And I'm looking at the pressure since number 1, those are the stats. And so just having that number 1 spot and really fumbling it after, can you handle the pressure of March Madness too?
All right, they got experience on that team, and they have a great head coach, and obviously the caliber of that program knows exactly what it's like to try and win a national championship.